So, my mom's sick, so I have to ban her from seeing her grandkids. But it's not because she's ill, it's because she's completely toxic and I don't want her to be around them. Let me tell you exactly what I'm going through. I'm 38, female, live with my husband and 2 children, Jason, 16, and Sonia, 14, and our little duplex in a quiet suburban city. I've been married for 16 years and currently work as a middle school teacher. The pay isn't much, but my husband takes care of most of the bills. So that doesn't matter. My family is a typical one really, with the ups and downs and bonds that hold us together. It's not something I would trade for anything in the world, and whenever I think of how blessed I am, I smile. As the big family person that both my husband and I are, we visit our extended family at least once a month. 3 days ago, my family and I paid a visit to my sister who lives across town. I was eager to meet her, but it died away when I saw my mother at her place. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't detest my mother at all, but there are some people that you would rather be away from, for your own sanity and peace of mind. My mother is one of those people, and she's a no-nonsense type woman, which is probably the reason for her controlling and demanding aura. Life with my mother was trying for me. I had to let go of things, friends, hobbies, and interests, preferences just to please her. As a teenager, I got tired of it. The only reason I stayed sane was my sister, who shared my sentiments. I met Frances in college, and when we got engaged in my final year, I was pushing for our marriage after graduation because it was going to happen anyways. My mom was not very happy about the entire thing, and she isn't so fond of Frances because of it. I'm sure she still believes that he was responsible for my apparent waywardness in college. While that's far from the truth, neither I nor Frances cared or acknowledged her opinion anyways. My husband lived far from my childhood home, and back then I thought I was truly destined to marry him, because I would be leaving behind my mom for a long time. For some time, I even called Frances my ticket out of bondage, a name he found very amusing. Anyways, my sister had talked to both me and my husband in private while the children stayed together. She had informed us of my mother's presence, and then begged us to take her out of our place. It was an instant no for me, but after listening to what my sister had to say, I had to say yes. See, my sister is a widow. She doesn't exactly have a 6-figure salary, and then there's the fact that my mom is sick, and there's the money for checkups and medication and whatnot, and I asked if she could stay in some sort of home instead, but my sister told me that my mother insisted on staying with a member of the family. I got annoyed as soon as I heard my mom's request, knowing fully well that it would be fulfilled at the expense of others' joy. Then there was the fact that my family was more than capable of taking care of my mother, which wasn't the same for my sister. Even my husband had to cajole me into it, knowing how much I loathed the idea of letting my mom live in my home. I know for a fact that I sounded very uncaring about everything, but there's no other way to explain how horrible it was living under my mom's roof, and how much I'm dreading my new inevitableness. After speaking to my sister, Frances and I went to the bedroom my mother was in. After attempting to chase Frances out of the room and failing, she turned to me and asked why I had come to see her after ignoring her for so many years. This isn't totally true, by the way. I made sure to occasionally call and send gifts to my mom when we lived apart. The one thing I did not do was visit very often. I visited my mother when my children were still little, but as the years went by, I stopped. There were a few disguised insults aimed at me, and after I informed my mom that she would be staying with me till she gets better. She did not respond to the news, so I took it as her approval. Jason and Sonia seemed to like their grandmother, which I found very surprising. Sonia was pleased to hear that my mother would be living with us, and even today she asked when exactly my mother was going to show up. My best guess is tomorrow. My mother has a doctor's appointment and has to change some of her medication and get some new ones before coming over. Then there's sorting out my mom's treatment and care while she's here. Well, I'm not sure when all of that will be done and over with, but I know it's only a matter of days. Frances has told me that things will be okay, but when we're alone in our bedroom, I can't help but complain about it. Sometimes I shut my mouth because I don't want to upset my husband by saying the same thing over and over, but the dread inside of me keeps growing as the day goes by. It's times like this that I really hate my sense of duty, which is what causes me to smile when my children talk about their grandmother, and when I talk to my sister about our mother. I hope all this is just paranoia and that my mother will comfort herself while in my house. I know I sound like a horrible person, but it's just me being honest. Can anybody tell me how I should handle this situation with my mom? I'm sure that she'd end up complaining about everything I do, so anybody out there, help me. Update number 1. Hey, it's OP again. I think Jason is starting to dislike his own grandmother. I'll tell you why. My mother has moved in 2 weeks ago, and like I said before, my children were happy to have her around, which is something I don't understand. Teenagers have not ever been fond of my mom, so I guess it's because that they have not seen her since they were kids. I know for a fact that Sonia spent the entire day in the living room with my mom, while Jason and I took her things to the bedroom and put the place in order. Dinner that night was partially pleasant, because my mom complained about the chicken I made, calling it overcooked. Truth be told, I did leave it in for longer than I used to, and that's because my mom used to tell me that my food was undercooked when I lived with her. It was detrimental to my self-pride, and after getting married, I spent hours practicing how to cook. My husband laughed when I told him why I did that and promised that nothing was wrong with my food. My children have never complained either about it, so I thought my mom had simply succeeded in messing with my head. I'm not sure why I let her opinion get to me anyways, because while the food wasn't bad, it wasn't as great as it usually was. Francis was not in the state of mind, so before I slept, I thought to myself, Day 1 with my mother, and I'm already stressed out and unhappy. I'm grateful that I work, because if I did not have my job to get me out of the house, I might lose my mind. For most of the day, on weekdays, I was absent, leaving just my mom and the nurse at home. When I got back with Sonia, the nurse left, and I took care of my mom instead. Francis came back and helped with that as well, despite my mom's initial resistance. He did get mad at my mom because of her unreasonable attitude towards him, and it was all a bit nice to have someone that understood how I felt about my mom. The first nurse that we hired quit a few days ago. She apologized for not coming to work when I called, but told me that she could not take care of my mom anymore. Well, I can't really blame her. I took a day off work to take care of my mom, and Francis took care of searching for another nurse. It's safe to say that nursing is not my calling, and it's not because I'm bad at taking care of people. When the new nurse resumed the next day, 3 days ago, I had almost given her a pep talk. I ended up not doing so in case she ran away because of it. Well, she's still here, but the smile on her face is gone. I could mention the things my mom has done to her. My husband and the surprisingly outspoken nurse who complained to me only once. Francis and I talked about it and decided to take action only if my mom upset the kids, and up until now there's been no complaints. Well, recently, Jason came up to me with a complaint. This my mother. He spoke to me about her and told me to talk to my mom. Apparently, she's bothering him concerning his interest in music and thinks it's a useless passion. I won't lie by saying I wasn't bothered by it in the beginning, but after hearing my son sing and compose his own songs, plus his teacher's approval in school, I decided to let him be. If he decided to pursue it as a full-time career, it didn't matter to me, and if he succeeded, I'd be more than happy for him. My mother doesn't think that way, though. Not all professions get her respect, not even mine. It didn't please her as much as I'd hoped it would. A couple days ago, my mom was sitting in the living room watching something on TV, and I was in the kitchen. She called me to have a conversation, and she had asked how my married life was, how it was now being a mother, and a few other things that we had never talked about in the past. It all went downhill when she asked why I was still a teacher. We argued for some time before I left her room in anger, and I reflected on what she said afterward. I didn't hate my job at all, but I didn't exactly love it either. There was the sense of fulfillment it brought because I was impacting young minds, but was I always eager to go to work? I shook off my doubt after some time because I was content with my job. My mother and her, quote, best interests for me were none of my concern, and it was not going to happen, so I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. Then Jason reported it. I'd say that he was quite angry because it took some time before I could get him to talk coherently. He told me that my mother had called him into her room and told him that Sonia mentioned something about him being interested in music. She had immediately told him to let go of that silly dream and refused to listen to anything Jason wanted to tell her. Jason had even tried singing to her the next day, along with reading her a song that he was working on, but it was futile. Later on, she tried getting Jason interested in sports and literally told him that if he wanted to chase weak dreams, he should at least attempt a sports career instead of music. Knowing my mother, I'm sure that was putting mildly, but it was still offensive. I promised to talk to my mother ASAP, but I knew that the discussion would not end very well. Update number 2. Hey, it's OP again. My mom finally succeeded in turning my entire family against me for the first time ever. I knew it was only a matter of time before it happened because she loved the victim card too much. There's just some other people who are impossible to live with, and while I've been told that those people simply need an authoritative figure, an iron hand to be put in their place, I don't care. If everything goes according to plan, my mom should leave house in 2 weeks. I went to talk to my mom because of Jason more than a week ago. I told her that my son was excellent at music and that she was not allowed to discourage him in the slightest. She screamed, but I warned her not to test me. I told her that Jason should have no reason to complain to me because of the same matter again, or that our entire extended family was going to hear that she was being horrible to my son simply because of a passion. It managed to shut her up, and she did not bother Jason again. My threat managed to silence my mom for some time till she started to bother my daughter. Sonia wants to be a medical practitioner, or at least that's what she says. I thought she meant a doctor at first, but she just wants to work in the field, and she's good at school too. I talked to Sonia about her grandmother, as I wondered why she'd spent so much time with someone that people disliked very easily. Sonia had told me that her grandmother was always interested in her studies, and was happy about her career choice. She said that she was seriously considering being a doctor, and I was happy about it, till she told me her reason. Apparently, my mother had told her that doctors are the only important people in the medical field and that Sonia should not settle for less with her zeal or knowledge. So, I asked Sonia if that was what she wanted to become, but she wasn't sure. Her literal answer was, "I guess I should go for the best occupation, right? I don't mind being a doctor." I was tempted to speak to my mother and tell her to stop putting ideas in Sonia's head, but I did not, because Sonia did not seem upset by it until a few days ago. On the drive home, she was totally silent, and when I asked, she told me that she did not want to speak ill of her grandmother. She eventually talked because I kept asking her what's wrong, and I learned that my mother had spoken ill of Jason to her. My mom also kept asking what area she would specialize in as a doctor, and when Sonia spoke to her about the possibility of her not being a doctor, she was yelled at and downgraded. The sadness in my daughter's voice was enough to push me over the edge. I barged into my mother's room despite Sonia begging me to not and demanded an explanation for her irrational behavior. As mortifying as it is to say this, I thought that the only way to deal with my mom was to become her, which was what I tried to do. Even the nurse was surprised and kept on staring at me before she left. My mom was abnormally quiet, and when I had calmed down and moved closer to her, she put a hand on her chest and frowned in pain. Then the convulsions began, and I was scared. I stood still for a few seconds watching my shake mother. Sonia and I had taken my mom to the hospital, and thankfully she turned out to be fine. The doctor said she was startled, and the guilt set in. My mom refused to say a word to me or Sonia when we went to see her, and she even told a nurse to inform us to pick her up the next day. I would have complained normally, but I didn't want to. A few results had been run on my mom, and while I could not understand them, I took them with me before picking up my mom. At dinner, she talked about how my yelling had caused her blood pressure to skyrocket above the normal range, and accused me of wanting to kill her. I kept quiet and tried to swallow my food, and she ranted and raved, not wanting to repeat the scare that happened earlier. Well, this had gone on for 2 days, and even my husband had told me to try to be more accommodating towards my mom. It was clear to me that my family was slightly against me because of what happened, and I was upset about everything. But you won't believe what I found out after looking at my mom's test results. Well, nothing serious was wrong with my mom. She had exaggerated the entire blood pressure thing and had turned my family against me because of it. Francis was very upset when he found out. He apologized to me immediately, and when I told him that I was sick of having my mom in the house, he hugged me and told me to take whatever action I was ready to do. We searched for care homes to take my mom, and tomorrow we'll place a few calls as well. Enough is enough. My mom might be sick, but she won't use that to manipulate me or any member of my family ever again. So, thank you, everyone. It is because of your advice and suggestions that I felt comfortable taking this step. Update number 3. Hey, it's OP. I'm here for another update. So, Francis and I eventually got a place to take my mom. It was still in town, so we could visit if we wanted to or if there was an emergency. It was far enough to feel like she wasn't anywhere close, though. The problem was executing the plan. My mom would not go to a care home willingly and might cause unwanted attention if we tried to use any kind of force. Then there was the fact that she didn't even want to speak to me after the little hospital episode, and Francis himself was a no-go. The doctor agreed, and given his consent and after checking out the facility, we concluded that my mom would be well taken care of. If she's against the idea, I was sure that she would be. There was little that she could do at this point, though. I eventually decided to let the children in on it. To my surprise, they were more than excited about it. See, Jason said that he had known that his grandmother was faking and exaggerating. He had also said that he would not have minded a heart attack. Yeah, though he earned him a warning from me. As for Sonia, she reasoned that we would have to hire a lot of nurses because the current one seemed frustrated already. She also mentioned being tired and the never-ending arguments and tension in the house. Personally, I was just tired of my mom's drama, but my children had given me more than enough reasons to go along with the plan. If my children were not happy with my mom's behavior, she's leaving, because my husband and I tolerated her because of them. Sonia told my mom that we planned to go out for during the weekend, and it took some time to convince my mother, but Sonia was her apparent favorite, so in the end she agreed. My husband and I got everything and ready, and before then, informing the center of our arrival that weekend and planning to get my mom's things once she was admitted to the nursing home. So, I'll cut short the story now. My mom was not happy when the car stopped in front of the nursing home. I thought she would be curious as to why we were there, but she caught on quickly, asking why we lied to her. I told her that I thought it would be better for her to stay with people just like her, and actual professionals who would take care of her. I was insulted afterward, but it was to be expected. Francis wanted to speak, but I stopped him because it would just be futile. My mother then made attempts to go back into the car, asking Sonia to assist her. When my daughter refused, my mom was surprised. Sonia always tried to reason with my mom, but when my mom began to express her disappointment in my already anxious daughter, I interfered again. I promised to visit as often as she wanted, but my mom stopped me again. I can't remember everything clearly, but Jason stepped in front about it. Right about then, he attracted a lot of eyes on himself. He told my mom that he thought she was a horrible person overall, and that while he was happy with her presence at first, he came to dread it. Jason then went on and on and on about a lecture about how to treat people, and my mother typically raised a hand for him to be quiet, but he did not stop. He kept talking till I asked him to stop. Sonia told my mother that she initially loved her presence in the home, but that my mom became too controlling, and it's simply unbearable. My mom attacked me and Francis after, and she asked why we had made the children lie to her, and asked how we could watch them insult her in that manner. In my anger, I told my mother that she wasn't allowed to see the children anymore. My mom told me that she was only looking out for them, but when Jason and Sonia told my mother that they were in on the plan because they didn't want her around anymore because of her controlling nature, my mother became eerily quiet. It reminded me of the time when I yelled at her because of Sonia, and I felt bad and just reminded her that we would visit regularly. I only did that with hopes that everything would be better, but my mom cursed at both me and my children. It was a painful thing to hear, and I'll never forget the things my mom said to me on that day. Francis finally intervened. I can't remember everything he said because I was still processing what my mother had told me, but Francis said that, well, we would never visit because my mom would never change no matter what we did. He also made sure to cut her off and wished her a happy life in the nursing home. Both my children said a few words to their grandma, and when a nurse came out to take my mom into the building, no one even bothered to tell her goodbye or even hug her. Yesterday, my mom called, telling me to take her back. I waited for an apology, but nothing came, and all she did was complain about the facility and the caretakers, and as stupid as this sounds, I might have brought her home if she would have said a simple, "I'm sorry," but she was my mother, after all. I told her that she was going to stay there for the rest of her life and that no member of the family was going to see her. I made sure to call my sister too, and now she's the only one the nursing home recognizes as my mom's relative. Finally, my mom is out of my life. For good this time. Nothing is going to change that, so anyways, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for reading, and all of your comments too. So, the grandmother in today's story gets a harsh dose of reality when she finds out her grandkids Jason and Sonia are both up to here with her crap. Those were the two that she was turning to for comfort because we already know OP was ready to kick her out. And then, finally, when she realized her grandbabies felt the same way, she had no choice but to go to the retirement home. I do want to know what you guys thought about today's story. If you were in OP's position, would you have done anything different? Let's talk about it downstairs in the comment section, guys. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every day, and I hope you enjoyed today's family fiasco. If you want more daily videos, consider subscribing. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.